So everyone, thank you for joining us. This is Symbiosis 2, and we are very, very pleased today to have Heather sharing with us about pointed pen etching. So over to you, Heather.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. It is a pleasure to be here, and it has been just an amazing journey on this mentoring journey with my girls. I call them my girls, and with Dorothy and Gemma and Yukimi. I have had a blast. But we're here to have some fun tonight, and I'm going to take you on a little journey of pointed pen etched florals. And I'm going to give you a little bit of the background, a little bit of the inspiration behind it, and then we will dive in. And whether you have a ballpoint pen and a piece of paper, or a pencil and a piece of paper, we're going to bring something to life with just a few little basic supplies. So while I am uploading something in the chat, if this is the very first Heather held ever demo that you've seen, just type yes in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and upload something in for you, so you can download something. If I can find it. There we go. Okay, so there you go. That's coming in. There is a little document that you can refer back to later on. You can go ahead and save that. If anybody has any trouble, just email me later and I will send it to you. So a lot of people said yes. Oh, that's so awesome. Well, welcome everybody. So I'll give you my 2-minute, then my 2-minute intro. So I am a trained floral designer. I spent 18 years in the floral industry before I found calligraphy. I came to calligraphy in 2003 as a complete novice and just could not figure it out. I, did my best with it. Floral design I could figure out, and I'm a needleworker. I did all kinds of antique and Victorian needleworker. That was no problem. I could teach myself that stuff. But give me a pen and ink, and I just had a little bit of trouble. In fact, I had a lot of trouble. And along the way, back in 2003, there was something called the Ornamental Penmanship Discussion Group. And that was not Instagram or YouTube or anything like that. That was really very much before all of that happened. And there was a guy that was running the Ornamental Penmanship Discussion Group, and his name was Joe Vitolo. And most of you, or many of you, will know who Joe Vitolo is. And at that time, I was asking so many questions on that discussion group that Joe said, you know what, just call. And I'm an introvert, and that was a big deal for me to call a perfect stranger. But in 45 minutes on a phone conversation, Joe corrected my pen point that I was using, the ink I was using, and the paper that I was using. So finding that those proper tools was something that really put me on my way and on the correct path. And Joe pointed me to Iampith, and Iampith is where I met two of my mentors. I met my mentor, Michael Saul, and also through email and through letter writing, I met my other mentor, Brian Walker. So I have been in the calligraphy game since 2003. I've been teaching since 2010. And it's just been a joy. And I see in the chat that the file, some people don't have the file. I can see it. Manon, can you see it? I'll try.
I don't see it either. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's
say it is there.
I'll do it one more time. It could be based on when somebody came into the room.
But I don't see it either. Maybe you can email to me.
Whether you can check if you're sending to everyone or just one person.
Oh, good grief. You're too smart, Rachel.
Because I've done that before. And I was like,
yeah, that'll be what happened. So that's why Manon got it. Okay, there we go. We'll do it one more time. Okay. Okay, boom. There we go. Now can you see it?
Yes, we got it. I got it.
All right, okay, so there's our hiccup. We got our hiccup out of the way. So let's now go into, enough about me, let's go into the pointed pen journey and how we can do pointed pen etch florals very simply and very effectively with almost nothing. So let me switch the camera. Okay, so this is the document that you can print off if you want to, or just save it on your computer. I will refer to that later, but let's take a peek at the inspiration behind it. So I am named Heather Victoria Held, and I am well named because I have an obsession for florals and an obsession for the Victorian era. And this is something called, well, this is actually just a Victorian postcard. But the Victorian era would just infuse their cards, their scraps. Scraps were little bits and pieces of paper that were even attached to pastries or on labels on perfume bottles or cigarette labels. Anything was that they had and they purchased was not plain. It was filled with ornament. Let me just lock the focus. So I have always been drawn to the Victorian era, and let's just take a little peek at this. These were also considered greeting cards, these little Victorian era booklets. And of course, I love the florals and the colors, very soft colors that are in there, but they're also filled with a lot of monotone printed ornament. So you can see this winter welcome guest, and let's look here and I'll zoom in on that. The detail in the initial, it's all monotone, but it is infused with so much ornamentation and so much delight. So I will spend, you know, yes, I see the one in color over here, the poppy design, and I'll take inspiration from that. But the one that's really going to draw my gaze are these ones that are done completely monotone. Here's another one, again from the era, a little booklet, Softly Now the Light of Day. And again, you can see some of the ornamentation just flowing through the letter forms. And again, a little bit of color, a little bit of ornament. Let me back it out a bit. One of the other traits of Victorian ornamentation is letting a line meander in and out of the picture itself. So they're giving a sense of illusion, a sense of depth that the image is going to, they're just creating more of an illusion than just a flat picture. So that's something that I look at and wonder, how can I carry that into my work? How can I do this with the pointed pen? So I'll just show you a couple of those images. Again, there's that meandering line. So you have a straight line or a frame, and then an arching, you know, swag of, this looks like autumn florals just going through and gracing that. So just beautiful inspiration from the Victorian era. This one here. This is in gold foil. So I'll try and get the glare off it. But you see, again, you've got the scroll line in the middle with the word Christmas and then the dancing ornament over top. So going in and out of a straight line and softening harshness with ornament. So this is something that we're going to chase with the pointed pen. And it's actually very, very simple. Again, beautiful cover on this one. Let's back it out. But inside, look at the lettering. Look at the dance. And look at the little tiny floral etch at the top. I'll try and take the glare off. That's printed with gold foil. So that's part of the inspiration. I will pop it forward a little bit more and show you a modern inspiration. This is Charles Van Sandwyk. And Charles Van Sandwyk is an illustrator. He is a Canadian illustrator, and he is one of my favorites. But let's look at the border. So again, I see the beautiful pen and ink design of the rabbit and how color has come in. And, gone on. This is called a line and wash technique, but the border itself is just ink work. He's done it with a gold foil printing technique, but if we look at the front page and you see the grasshoppers and you see the little bluebells, beautiful little dancing frogs, all with kind of the linear quality of pen and ink. Look at the birds. And this is something I want you to observe. This is called economy of line, where you're not putting in every single line, every single detail. You're economizing your line and you're getting as much of the impression of the bird without a lot of, every single stroke and every single feather. You can certainly put more in. But again, the border here really economizes line. And there is a difference with putting a lot of detail into a little pointed pen flower or just getting the essence of the flower. So by way of inspiration, I wanted to show you that. And this is Maurice Sendak. So Maurice Sendak wrote Where the Wild Things Are, and I know a lot of us are familiar with that book, but this is not as popular, Higgledy Piggledy Pop, the story of this little dog, which is a pretty cool little story. But look at the detail in his pen and ink work. This is extravagance of line, where every single detail that you can think of is put in, and you get a much more dense and rigid picture. Zoom out, there we go. Dorothy, if you tell everybody that I will email you and they can all just get that PDF that way, and then we'll make sure that
if you don't have the PDF, can you just direct message me your email and then I will send it to you?
Yeah, we'll make sure you get it. All right, so another influence in my pointed pen etch flowers is Kate Greenaway, and there was one particular image that did all really influenced a lot, and it was this one. So let me pop it forward. So this is, again, is a line and wash technique. This is a Victorian 4-color printing technique, where this rose in particular is one that has really informed my study and really informed how my pointed pen style has evolved. So it's important to acknowledge your influences and to build on what they've done. We don't want to repeat the past. We want to see what we can take from these influences and bring them forward. Dorothy, I have till 10:30, right? Is that correct?
Yes, you do, but you can go over, I don't mind. That's nothing up to you.
Sounds good, sounds good. So this again is another resource that you can look at. This is a Dover publication. This is by Carol Bellinger Grafton. And Dover publications are very inexpensive and they're copyright free. Again, even though they're copyright free, we're not going to copy them, but we're going to take inspiration. And medieval flower and plant illustrations show us economy of lines. So they're giving you the essence of the flower or the plant with very few lines and a more impactful structure, as opposed to Victorian pictorial borders. Okay, so Victorian pictorial borders are very different. They're going to show like profuse lines. So the extravagance of line, again, along that Maurice Sendak, where every little detail that you can think of. I know Manon's in this class. Look at all these little cherubs. Manon, we didn't even get to this in our little session, but there's just so much detail. Now I will pop forward here. When you really zoom in on the detail, you see what the line quality is on those little flowers. These, I really don't want to say the word, but these are almost doodles. They are just so, they're done rather rapidly, but they're giving you the impression. And when you back it out, look at how ornate it looks. Yeah, this is a wonderful book, Victorian Pictorial Borders. All right, so a couple more and then we'll get down to business. this one, the wedding garland, I think if you've taken classes with me before, I've shown this book. But again, it's part of that Victorian aesthetic where you see the monotone colors and how they coax a sense of illusion that this picture has some depth and there's just one color. So you don't need a lot of supplies. You don't need to have everything at hand, and you can create some very effective illustrations. Again, look at that W and all that ornamentation in there. It's absolutely stunning. So back at the beginning of the pandemic, where we were all isolated and we were, kind of despairing, it was a really weird time. I did a lot more letter writing, and I wanted to do things that would bring me a sense of personal peace. And I just started doing a lot more of the pointed pen etching. I would come out here to my studio, and there was a lot of angst, there was a lot of anxiety and things to work through. All of my livelihood had dried up, all of my husband's. So what could I do that would just give me some peace and some calm? And I would write to people, and I would just be embellishing notes and cards and dropping it in the mail when we could, because we were still able to go out on walks and things like that. And I just got an incredible sense of peace and an incredible sense of satisfaction just by, this is a little note card ready to go. And all I've done is the corner etch. So I thought of these little designs and these little illustrations as sort of portable piece where you could just give yourself a sense of peace, get your mind off of your situation by doing something that was relatively easy. So I started to play with these images and play with these designs. I did a lot of note cards, and a lot of notes that came out of that year had the word hope. So this design, this little frame, is done entirely with a color of gouache called Paris blue, and then a little bit of water to just build up that illusionistic effect. But again, just the sense of peace you get by putting pen to paper. Nice little corner ready to go. So I would get all of these notes and cards ready to go, and then I would just write whenever I was ready, pop it in the mail. It took almost no time. Again, another little message of hope, only believe. So a little bird. This is all done with watercolor, and then just pen etched and a little bit of water added to give it some softness. Love, butterfly, symbol of hope. You've got your pen etching, got a little bit of ribbon built up. So very simple to do. Every once in a while, I would add some color. So if you can do all of your pen etching and then decide you want to put a little transparent colored pencil over top of it. If you've used a waterproof ink, you can go ahead and put watercolor on top. But these are just done on bits of paper. So this is just a little piece of very lightweight, it feels like Arches text wove, very lightweight paper. There's that word hope again. You can't get around it. We just needed to hold on to hope. But again, that idea of illusion and going over top of a line and bringing the flowers into the forefront, totally gleaned from what I saw in those Victorian influences. And over here, another one, and the only little extra bit of detail, let me just focus that, was the little bit of pastel. So very delicate. Oh, we put sparkles, we put crystals on this because why not? Why not have all the sparkle in the world? So that's the background behind it. The materials you need to do this are relatively simple. So I'm just going to get a piece of paper. I'm going to get a piece of practice paper before and just show you a little bit of a lead in. And I'm just going to pull it off of the pad. So I'm going to pull a couple sheets off. So I use Japanese paper. This is Maroman Memnosine paper. It is a 5mm grid, extraordinarily smooth. I practice with very, very smooth paper. But the beauty of this particular technique is you can work on textured paper. So off to the side here, if I want to do a good design, I've got Stonehenge, just a little pad of Stonehenge color paper. So there's a little bit of a tooth to this. The beauty of this is that it doesn't matter what the surface of your paper was, because your pointed steel pen is barely going to touch the paper. So I see a question there in the chat. What is it? Do I use the word etchings and not illustrations because it's done with a pointed pen? So yeah, the answer to that question is yes. We're going to just kind of scratch the surface of the paper, and it could be called an illustration, but we're going to use our pointed pen in a very delicate and soft manner. So that's why I sort of use that word etching. Dorothy, did I miss any other questions there in the chat? Or we're pretty good so far?
Yeah, we're good so far.
All right, so paper, I am using a straight pen, so I don't use an oblique holder for any of my script lettering. I'm a little bit of an outlier. Rose, that is Maroman Memnosine paper. It is, I get it here in Canada. You can get it from Amazon or from Jet Pens. But I am a right-handed calligrapher and I use a straight holder almost exclusively. So all of my Spencerian, my script writing, and all of my ornamental flourishing is done with a pointed pen in a straight holder. This happens to be a vintage nib. So I'm using a vintage Hunt 21. These are the Iron Man of my studio, but my supply is limited. And when they are gone, I will go back to a Zebra G for the pointed pen etching, and I can get a lot of mileage out of a Zebra G. But almost anything that you have at hand. I've even done this with a very small Mitchell, so a Mitchell 6 broad edge nib. You can use just about anything. The lighter was just in case the nib gives out and I need to replace it. The beauty is we can use any writing fluid. This is an orange Sailor Gentle ink. So this is a fountain pen ink. And a fountain pen ink is not going to be light fast, so you don't want to do any real artwork with it. And it's also not waterproof, which means I can agitate it and make it bleed and flow into the leaves and the flowers and give a sense of shading. So this is a really nice product to use, but just bear in mind, you don't want to do any real artwork with it because it will fade. But for envelopes and notes, not a problem. My go-to, what I'm going to demonstrate with is actually Cornelison's walnut ink. And this has been the best walnut ink I've ever found. So I'm going to start with that, and then we'll see how far we get if I can get into some gouache or watercolor. So literally anything that you can get through to flow through the pointed pen will work. So I am going to start with just a warm-up stroke that if you've never used a pointed pen before, there's a difference between a shade and a hairline. So a hairline starts with no pressure, but if I add pressure, I can get a stroke like that. So let's pop that forward. And you see how the ink is just sitting on top of the paper? So hairline, shade. And to get that shade, I add a little bit of pressure and pull toward me. And I want you to notice the precision of the stroke. So the pointed steel pen has the ability to give us a very fine hairline. And this particular pen will give me a shade about that wide. I really can't go much heavier than that for a shaded stroke. So in my pointed pen etching, I really don't have a lot of those strokes there. It's really built up with light little hairline strokes. So if you want to just practice some in a couple different directions, sometimes I will stipple. And to stipple, I will just let the point of the pen create those little dotted strokes. So get a feel for your particular nib. And I also want you to tune your hearing in to what is happening on the paper. So you should hear almost nothing. So we're not pressurizing this hairline stroke. If you start to hear a scratchiness, you can maybe try adjusting your pen angle. Maybe your pen is up a little high, and lower your pen angle to your paper and go from there. Okay, so let's create a couple of strokes or designs. What if I create this eyelash shape? No pressure on the nib at all. And I'm just going to draw this delicate leaf shape. And by itself, that would be just fine for a little leaf shape in flourishing. But with the pointed pen etching, I start to build up a few little linear strokes. And what if I create another leaf? And again, it's indication or somewhat of an indication of a central line. And here is, let's put a little berry on there, and I can even add a little bit of shading there for berry. So that's just a warm up. Again, hairline. What if I put one of those little leaves and another little leaf? And if I create the indication, if I want this to look a little bit like a rosebud, with a hairline stroke, I create a narrow, elongated shape to create the sepal portion of the rose. And maybe just a backward C. And it doesn't look like much, but what happens if I start to indicate a little bit of shading? And I start to indicate a little bit of shading here. Or maybe I put a little pressure and release stroke here. We start to get little dancing designs. What else can we do? I can create a different type of rosebud. I can create my hairline, come up and create an oval. So that is starting to create a different shape. And if I pull a stroke to the left and a stroke to the right, I start to get the indication of a different type of bud. And again, I can follow through with those leaves and etch in just the indication of the venation pattern. Again. And I could even hit this with a little bit more of the etching. A very simple flower and a staple that you saw in the Victorian work, and a staple of mine is a cherry blossom or an apple blossom. And again, I'm just going to dip. So I'm going to start with a circle. And around the circle, I'm just going to come in with these lazy heart shapes. And maybe I'm going to stipple. This is the first time we've done some stippling. Maybe I'm going to bring the stippling out into the petal a little bit, and that's going to give the impression of stamens or pistils. If I decide I want to go along the back of a petal or two with this backward C shape, you're starting to get the illusion of the petal curling forward. And now I'm just going to etch in there to create the striation marks of the petal. Again, let's put another little backward C there. You could even decide you just want to do a little bit of shading at the end of that curl and just pop in a little bit with your pointed pen. And again, you can do this with a ballpoint. You can do it with whatever, because we're really not pressurizing anything. The concept of clustering, of putting flowers next to each other to create a sense of a depth and illusion. So if I want to cluster another one of these, all I do is put the next circle center too close for comfort. So there's no way I can draw it without it interfering. So I start with that back petal. And then I will come around. Maybe that's how many I will get in on that little design. Let's get the stippling in. And again, you're just playing with the idea of illusion. Okay. I'm going to tuck a leaf in. Now, if I want that leaf to look like it's receding or it's in behind, I'm going to come in with some shading strokes and start to create that little bit of depth. Same thing here. Central line. And I want the flower to look like it's on top and that the leaves are receding underneath. So where you go in with this darker line, these darker lines, you're creating that illusion. Let's pop another one. So again, and just like that, you have created a motif. And you can build from there. What if I want the next flower, if I'm going to create this huge big garland, and the garland can be a frame, or the garland can be a corner, or it can go over a scroll, it can do anything. What if I want the next flower to be a rose? So rather than the circle center, the rose is started with a spiral. So I'm just going to create this little spiral. And again, it's a little bit far away from this cluster, but I'll make it work. And I'm going to create a cup and a central line. And that's the basis for the center of the rose. And I'm going to come under here and start to add some shading. I can maybe add a little bit more shading there. And I'm going to come in with the petals. Same type of petal, but you may need a couple more of them. And I'm just kind of giving a little spring in it, giving it a little bit of a wiggle at the end to create that idea of a curling petal. And again, the shading. And the shading here will follow the curve of the petal. And again, let's pop in a leaf and a leaf and another leaf. And you see how it builds. And you could literally decide, okay, you want to create a line that just meanders and wiggles. And all you would do is follow that meandering line with your placement of your flowers and whatever motifs that you want. Now, I would not draw in the line. I was just giving you an idea. But you could decide, okay, here and there, I want to have a little spray of leaves coming in, or I want to have a group of berries coming in. And the idea behind creating a garland or creating an undulating line like that would be repetition of motifs. So I think it would be a really good place to put another flower like that. And you can just build, and that is exactly how I built this one, right? So you arch the line and you just start repeating elements. The only thing I haven't shown you is that wheat stroke. So the wheat stroke is it won't work if you're using a ballpoint, but you could kind of wing it and see what happens because you're actually going to pressurize the stroke. So it starts with this eyelash. Let's just draw that little eyelash hairline. And then I am just going to put those little pressure and release strokes that we started out with along that meandering line. And I always do some sort of curl on the end or some sort of dotted stroke to give it the illusion or the sense that the curve is fading off gracefully. So if I put another one here. Again. We could have a little dragonfly kind of flying up into our little arrangement. So if I wanted to have a dragonfly flying in, I would pop in the little head, create the little body shape, and a nice long tail. I don't draw all the segments. Little antenna, this little Y shape. And right at the base of the head, let's do a straight line. And we're going to come back with this little loop. And we're going to try and get a similar one on the other side. And your secondary wing is just slightly smaller and pointed inward a little bit more. Slightly smaller and pointed inward. And you can go ahead and draw in just some little Y shapes in the wing. And now you've got a little dragonfly, and you can even get his little flight pattern in there if you want. So little touches, little whimsical touches. I haven't added any water to this. So these take on an appearance. Let me just grab a color. All right, so it's actually fine the way it is. You can kind of create this sort of sepia toned illustration with just the ink, the walnut ink alone. But if I decided, oh, let's make the rose, or let's make the rose pink. So I could go over those shaded lines. This is just a pink colored pencil. And the trick is not to color the whole thing in, but to leave a little bit of the white of the paper as a highlight. So I am just going to very subtly add a little bit of the pink, just get a little bit of color in there. And then for these leaves, if you wanted to add color, I usually put a tip on the end and a little bit of pink. I have 2 shades of green, and the darker shade goes at the base, and then I fade it out. So colored pencil is transparent, and it will show those etching lines through. This one that has a lot more etching, I'll do color these 2 leaves, have a lot more pointed pen etching. So if I go in with my deeper tone, and then I start to come in with the lighter tone Do you see the automatic shading that's already there? It's like a grisaille effect with very, very little effort. So that's one way that you could treat these designs. You could add transparent color on top. Another thing you can do is agitate the walnut ink and get this rusting effect. So I'm just going to wet a brush. This is just water. And all of that little detail and all of those striation marks, do you see what happens as I agitate it? I am getting closer to the look of that Victorian, the Victorian scraps and the Victorian postcards just by going in and agitating the walnut ink. Really, really cool and effective. So let's go here in that shading line. I'm just going to agitate it. And I can take even into these berries and just add a little bit of shading. So there's your effects. You can leave it the way it is, which is, it's okay, it works. You can agitate it and create that really sepia tone, or you can add transparent color on top. Now the dragonfly, I'm just going to go under that top wing and just agitate a little bit of the walnut ink. I'm going to agitate and just get a little bit of tonal value. You can go down the center. And I can even take on, and dragonflies, I always add a little bit of magic to. So if I take my Sakura Jelly Roll pen, and this one, the color is Clear Stardust. And let's go right over top and just make it sparkle. So now we have all those effects that we can play with. And that's just with walnut ink. So the possibilities just open up to all these, anything you can get to flow through that pointed pen. So over here, let's do something really fun. So that if you take one thing away from this little demo, this is what I want you to take away, is have on your desk or nearby your workstation a stack of paper cut to either note card size or 5x7. I always have to hand. And again, like I said, at that beginning of that pandemic, I would just come out to my desk and get a note sent off to somebody else that I was thinking about. So I have a stack of pre-folded note cards. I have envelopes to one side. I just always have something ready to do, even if I don't know who I'm going to write to. And I used to, before I got really busy with teaching, I used to dedicate Sundays to just coming out to the studio or to my desk and seeing who's on my mind. And I would write that person a letter and just pop it in the mail. And it was a huge, huge part of sort of my Sunday routine. I just have a blue envelope here, and let's have a little bit of fun because I know I have to get a card ready, and I'm still in an envelope exchange. Thank you, Cecilia, for your kind words. So this is just an envelope. Okay, let me back out a little bit. And let's get that Paris blue. So I'm just going to get some calligraphy gouache. So Paris blue, ultramarine blue is beautiful. Phthalo blue, Payne's gray is just extraordinary. But here we go. I'm just going to get a little bit in there. I'm just going to wake it up a little bit. And rather than dipping my pen into ink, I'm going to stir it up with a brush and just brush it onto the back of my pen point. So this is very forgiving. This is very lenient. You don't have to have the perfect viscosity. It's this is Schmincke calligraphy gouache. It is super, super fine gouache. So it is great for writing. It is great for the pointed pen etching. And let's just brush it onto the back. See, I didn't clean my pen off, so that's going to make an interesting color. All right, here we go. So let's play. So if I'm going to etch a little corner, you want to not put that corner right at the edge. You want to leave a little bit of margin, and you don't want it to go into the area that's going to be in your writing zone for the address. So I usually come in, oh, we're in Singapore, so we're in centimeters, maybe about 3 centimeters. Okay, between 2.5, 3 centimeters. If you're in the US, about an inch. But I'm going to put in one of those beautiful blossom flowers and watch the sort of the delight of this Paris blue on blue. I'm going to start to get those etchings in, those little striation marks. And you don't have to be perfect. This is part of the reason it was such a peaceful habit, is it did not have to be perfect. Let's get all of these. And if you have any experience with the pointed steel pen, it knows if you're agitated. That is a small point. So if you've had too much caffeine or you're agitated, you're going to get a really shaky line. But the beauty of this is we're just doing really light little drawings. Let me do a group of 3. Again, your little cluster. So think about starting something just a little bit too close for comfort. And again, I can agitate this pigment, or I can leave it the way it is. So generally speaking, if you are going to do an etching like this, put in all of the lines that you want with the thinking that you are not going to agitate it, because you will get in all of the detail that you want. And then you have the, you can decide whether or not you need to agitate it at all with the water to get the shading. But again, so you want to put in all the detail that you can at this point. I'm going to get another stroke there. And this is where pen drawing meets offhand flourishing. And if you're not familiar with what offhand flourishing is, it is the direct process of thinking on paper without pre-planning. So if I wanted, it's like I'm not really thinking, and I find that I have a hard time speaking and doing this at the same time. But it's as if you are just watching a design emerge without pre-planning every little move. This is part of the freedom of this process, and it is a descendant of offhand flourishing without all of the cartouches. So I'm going to come around here, create some leaves, and I'm going to try and consider the corner. So what if I bring a nice little bud down here? And let the gouache do its thing. So it's starting to fade in parts because I don't have much ink or gouache on the nib. That's okay. We're going to get a variety of tonal values that way. Okay, pressure and release stroke, that little wheat flourish. And again, I'm trying not to encroach too much into the writing area. And this actually breaks normal calligraphy layout protocol, because normally you do all your text first, but I would just prepare these cards and envelopes without knowing where they were going. So I didn't have the text. So this one, hopefully I won't wreck the address when I go and write it. Okay, so that's just very simply, I feel the race against the clock a little bit here, but I'm just letting this design emerge and grow. Very simple strokes. And it's looking okay. Just 2 little flourishes there. And I think, let me back it out. So this is what we've got going on. I think it would look awesome if I put one on the end of the flap there. So why don't I? We're going to go around this way and just get one little, you dig into part of the motif. Now I got to be careful if I do agitate, you don't want to activate the glue on the other side. So I'm going to try and just go up a little bit. And my hope with this demo is that you will kind of tap into the power that we have as calligraphers, and that is reaching out and sort of blessing somebody with a note or a card. It is sort of enlightened practice that we can do these things and then drop it in the mail to somebody and brighten somebody else's day, which is a pretty big deal. And as calligraphers, I just found that the writing of notes and the writing of cards was the better use of my practice time than just doing pages and pages and pages of practice, because that did not keep my interest. But if I was writing to a person and sending a note, my interest was engaged. And that's just me, but maybe that might help you as well. All right, so I'm just going to be mindful of the clock. And I think that I could easily do another corner, but you kind of get the idea. Let's go ahead and agitate this. So there it is. Very, very simple strokes. You see how rapidly they went down. I'm going to clean the nib. And just going to dip my brush into water. And look at the beauty that springs forward. Paris blue on blue. So I hope you can see possibilities emerging with this quick little technique. I mean, we've got festive holidays approaching. We've got, well, if you're in Canada, you've got Thanksgiving coming up. There's little autumn leaves or acorns, anything like that that you want to do. And I would not usually do this until the address was in, but if you wanted to take that little sparkle pen and just get that little sparkle, it just brings it all to life. If this was not going in the mail and it was going to be a birthday card or something, I could put Swarovski crystals in the centers. The possibilities are absolutely endless. But the structure of drawing with your pointed pen, think of it as a drawing tool rather than the pressure and release tool that we use for our scripts. And even if I do a bigger piece, and I'll pull this one. So here's one of the bigger pieces that I've done. It's a larger piece. All of the pointed pen etching was done first, and then your layer of color was done on top. So if you use a waterproof ink, you can add watercolor and things on top of it, or transparent colored pencil, or you can use this nice technique to just agitate what you've put down on paper. So I hope that helps. I hope you find it fun, and I hope you'll play with it and just see what you can come up with. Dorothy, did I miss any questions?
So a lot of comments about how gorgeous and beautiful. And yeah.
Oh,
Anyone has questions for Heather? You can unmute or type in chats.
yeah, happy to answer any questions, but hopefully you'll give it a try.
See?
Hey, did somebody, oh, look at what they did, Dorothy. Hold that up again. That's, that's awesome. That's awesome. Rachel, did you do one? Oh, can we pin her? Let's see.
Where is Rachel? Oh, Rachel, let's add you spotlight.
Oh, she's got a card done. That's
Wow.
stunning. Holy cow. Yeah, well done. Well done.
All right, cool. Okay, who
Beautiful.
else wants to show?
Anybody else?
Damala has something to show. Oh, that is so
Oh, that's gorgeous. That looks
Yeah.
beautiful. Beautiful.
beautiful. Thanks. Anyone else? Oh,
Maria.
Maria, hang on, let's spotlight you.
Oh, well done.
I
That's-
think I'll work on the native. Oh, I've got it upside down, have I? No, the native flora in the forest where I live. So this has given me a lovely thing. I love this, Heather. I think I've found my mentor.
Oh, I
All
hope you
right.
play. I hope you play. That's amazing.
Great. Cool. Anyone else wants to share? Natalie, did you draw along?
Yeah, I did, but I did it in like practice paper, not in an actual card.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
pretty.
So
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
probably put it in a like do an actual card later.
That's
Great.
gorgeous. That's
Wonderful.
gorgeous.
Wow.
Sharmila.
Yes, Shamila, we've shared already, yes?
Oh, have we? Okay. Oh, there it is. Yes. It's
Yes.
gorgeous. That's that
It's
blue one.
very
Yes.
nice.
Beautiful.
Yes, very nice. Now
Well
we have a new superpower.
Yes, you do have a new superpower. That's awesome.
Cool. That's great. Anybody else wants to share?
I am only an email away. If anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to contact me, and I hope you enjoy the PDF. Everybody got it who needed it,
I think
Dorothy?
so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you don't have it, just direct message me and I will send it. Direct message me your email and then I'll send it.
Oh, Natalie said it's the first time using gouache like that. Wow,
Oh,
that's awesome.
cool.
That's awesome.
That's great. So fun.
It is fun. Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? They don't take that much time. So hopefully you'll find time to play. Thank you for the kind words. Thank you.
Wait, I have this question, right, Heather? I realized that whenever you draw the line, there are no straight lines. Is that correct? No straight lines.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely. There's very few straight lines in nature. If you really look at nature and look at branching and the way flowers are formed, you won't see rigid straight lines. That being said, these work against a straight line really, really well. So if I flip my camera back, so bear in mind that if you have a straight line, like a frame, a meandering or an overarching or something that interferes with a straight line, it looks very dramatic. So use the straight lines as the foil against the clusters of flowers that you're working on and watch what happens. It's really quite beautiful to see that contrast.
Great. Beautiful.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for attending.
Yay, thank you, Heather, for sharing. This has
My
been,
pleasure.
it's amazing you managed to pack so much information into 1 hour. And I know that this is a video that I'm going to watch again and again and again, with pauses in between to follow and all. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you.
My
Great.
absolute pleasure. Happy to do it.
Great. Well, I'm going to stop the recording.
Sure.
Mm.